Welcome back to Cooper's Corner. It's ball joint day. My wife's Jeep needs upper and lower ball joints on the passenger side. So we're going to do that up for her. If you're following along at home, this is what you're going to do. You're going to take the wheel off. You're going to take the brake off, the brake caliper. You're going to take the brake rotor off. Then you're going to take 3 bolts off the back of the wheel bearing. And those bolts are right there, and then another one behind this U-joint. And those are a 13 millimeter 12 point. So I like to use a socket because it's just a little bit better than a wrench for that. And of course a breaker bar, ratchet for taking the brake off, whatever lug nuts you have, you'll need a socket for that. Whatever socket you need for your brake caliper, because some of them are different. It just depends on what you got. This is a 2000 TJ. Over there is a 95 YJ. It'd be the same deal, but it could be this different bolts for the brakes, as I've found. This would be the same process for any XJ or ZJ, LJ. And this adapter kit came with instructions on how to do it. So, I also have a light. I always want to have a light, a good jack, and a jack stand as well. And I like to go one side at a time, makes it easier. So, I'll put a clip here right after this, how I determined that the ball joint itself was bad. I believe it's the upper ball joint. So what I did was I jacked it up with my jack. I put one hand at the top, one hand at the bottom, and I gave it a wiggle. You can't hear it so well when you only have one hand, but if you hear that wiggle, if you hear that distinctive noise you'll hear in the clip, when you're going from one hand at the top, one hand at the bottom, you know it's a ball joint. If you grab the one side of the tire and then the other side of the tire and you get that noise, it could very well be that tie rod there. You might want to just throw a camera over here and do it and see what looks like it's moving, or it could be the wheel bearing itself, and that is what those 3 bolts are for. That's the wheel bearing there. That's the wheel bearing there. If it is the wheel bearing, that's a whole different story. Today we're just covering ball joints. So let's get into it. No more play. Good to go. New tool, buddy. Okay. Can you pull that stuff out, please? Pull it all out. All of it out. Here we go. This is unexpected. Kind of thought that'd be bigger. No, don't put your mouth on it, bud. Okay. This part is specific to Jeeps. Ready?
Yeah.
Didn't want you to get into it. Okay, now.
Oh, that's tiny.
Yeah, it's heavy.
Yeah, I'm gonna try and hold it.
Okay, do you see this spacer? You
Yeah.
see how it's not flat? How it's got an angle to it?
Yeah.
This is a specific spacer you need for Jeep Dana 30s and other stuff, some Dodge stuff, to change the ball joint. These are all oily. This is something you need for the top one because it's too far offset.
Oh, it's too heavy.
It's heavy and oily. Okay, let's put it all back in. We'll unopen the bigger one.
Open this.
The bigger one.
Yeah.
Can you pull the box out?
I know.
Pull the box out. No, I mean, just take it off the table, please. There we go. Okay. This is the tool that goes with. So those are spacers. And this is
It?
all from Amazon and all very cost effective.
It's not it.
It's a kit. It is a ball joint and U-joint kit. Yay!
It's not funny.
Brand new. Look, feel how heavy that is. Can you lift it? Oh, it's heavy. Oh. But you can lift it.
It's like spinning round and round.
That's right.
Like this.
So we put all these spacers in there to change ball joints and U-joints and stuff, buddy.
I can't lift it.
Yay, new tool.
Another door.
This is Canada, so these two things together were, I
Ah.
don't know, like 135 bucks or something. Well, worth it for doing the job, but it's this part that you need because of, more specifically, this spacer, which is on an angle, which this doesn't have any on an angle, and this one, which has a little cutout. You can buy more expensive kits that have these, but these two things kind of added up to the same, and I knew this was specific to doing Jeeps. So that'll work on Dana 30s for XJ, YJ, ZJ, TJ. It'll also work on Dana 30s for the JK, and probably the JL, but I don't know about that. Bud, don't put it in your mouth. Thanks for watching. Okay, the wheel is off. We're about to take the rotor off. Caliper's already off. Always suspend your caliper instead of letting it hang by that hose there. It'll ruin the hose. Yeah, if you do it repetitively. I like to use a bungee cord. You can also use a coat hanger, hang it off of whatever. I hung it over there to get it out of the way because we're going to do ball joints. We need to be right here. We need to be underneath. If your rotor is not coming off easily, this is all new stuff, so it's going to fall apart for me. But if it's not coming off, spray in some penetrant here, spray it into these little gaps here, wherever you can to try and get it off. Don't hit the face. You'll ruin the rotor. You can tap it here, you can tap it here. Sometimes you can actually leave the wheel on with the lug nuts most of the way off. Put them on like 3-4 threads, and move the wheel back and forth. You just you can actually kick the surface of the tire there, and that helps break the break that free of the bearing. Now once you have that off, you'll see the wheel bearing. This is a hub bearing. You do not need to take this nut off in behind this castle retainer. It's a 36mm nut, but again, you don't have to take it off to do this job. We're just doing ball joints. If you were doing a U-joint, you would need to, but for today, we do not need to. Once we take off the 3 bolts here, this one, that one, and the one in behind, this will all come out as one unit. So that U-joint there that's going to be in our way for doing these ball joints, this whole shaft and everything's going to come out as one big thing. Make sure the wheels are tracked straight, otherwise you'll have a hard time getting that out. Next, we're going to take these 3 bolts off. And again, this is new, so it's all going to come out easily. I've used anti-seize when I put this new one in. But if you can't get this out, which is very common that they are rusted in there good and solid, don't hit the flange anywhere. Don't hit it here, don't hit it here. You will wreck the bearing that's inside of here. If you need to tap on this to get it out, which most people will, you can hit it here, you can hit it there to try and force this to come around a little bit, because this is all circular in behind. It's a circular flange, so you can hit here. The other option you have is to take your 13mm socket that you're using for these 3 bolts holding in the wheel bearing, put it on there, start the engine, make sure your wheels are chalked, make sure you're neutral, of course, or park, whatever you choose, and turn the steering wheel, and make sure these bolts are backed out 5-6 threads, turns, and turn the wheel of the steering wheel, and this will come into contact with here, forcing the bearing away from this housing. Now you, obviously you need to do that on both sides. You do it here, once it comes out a little bit, switch this over to the other side. Turn the wheel the other way, comes into contact here, forces this side out a little bit. And as you work it out, you can spray some more lubricant, more penetrant in there, and eventually you'll get it out. Okay, let's take this out. So, just like I said, it's all gonna fall apart, but that dust plate is gonna come off with it. When you take it out, use two hands, support the back of the shaft so it's not banging around like what I'm doing. I'm gonna clean it after, so a little bit of junk on these splines isn't gonna hurt anything. So it's out, and now we're ready to start taking this ball joint out, the upper, and taking out the lower. Sometimes it is a lot easier if you take off this tie rod here, so you'll have to take out the cotter pin and the castle nut. And some people use a pickle fork, a separator tool to get this out. I find most of the time that ruins this grease retainer. So I'll just take a hammer and I'll hit it really hard right here. Generally, that can damage your ball joints. So, but that's okay. We're replacing them, and they'll just fall out because that's all tapered jobby there. Get that out, and we'll go from there. Okay, we're at the point where we're going to take off the nut on the bottom of the lower ball joint and on the bottom of the upper ball joint. The upper ball joint requires a 22 millimeter socket, which is comes in most kits. The one that doesn't is this 28 millimeter socket for the lower ball joint that you may have to buy separately. I've never seen a kit that comes with it. I'm about to spray those with some WD-40 and use my impact gun to get the bottom one off anyway, just because I can. You can also use a breaker bar. As you can see, the spindle or bearing housing, if you like, is off now. I chose to take it off of the tie rod because I just didn't want it in the way. I didn't want it flopping around out in the wind here. Just take it off, and I used my hammer for both. So as you can see, this is tapered here, so that's what holds it in there essentially. So inside here is a ball, and there's grease around it. So this is actually stationary. This nut and this piece doesn't move around when you're turning the wheel. Right here, it stays solid in here. So when you hit right here with the hammer, the same as here, as you can see, these are the marks of me hitting it with my mini sledge. It forces this circumference to go oval just for an instance, just to let go of that spindle, of that taper. So as you hit it, it goes oval just enough to make it let go of that. You have to hit both. You have to hit the upper and the lower to get it free. So when I had it up here, it was like this. And I hit the top and the bottom and equally until it dropped out like that. So let's do some ball joints. All set up to remove the upper ball joint with our adapter cups. We are using this one and this one to remove the upper ball joint. As you can see, the one with the cutout here is because there's very little clearance here, so having a whole cup there, this cutout lets it sit back just enough so that this cup doesn't want to roll off the edge as we tighten down this screw. Now, to get this all set in there, I had to remove the screw from the C channel, sit it all in there, and then put that back in because that cup's quite tall. It's quite tall because as we tighten it down with our 22 mil socket and our ratchet, it's going to force the ball joint up into the cup. And once it's all free, we'll take it all apart, we'll put the new one in. The upper ball joint is out. This is now set up to remove the lower ball joint. The lower ball joint, contrary to the upper one, is forced downward into this cup. Now, this is the same cup as same two cups as before. The cutout is on the back side because of the flange in the metal there. Something I noted when I was putting this together was that screw rod as you can see, is very close to the ground. I had to jack up the Jeep a little bit more, and this Jeep is sitting particularly high with a 5-inch lift and 35-inch tires, so you may have to jack up your Jeep a fair bit. I'm going to crank that out now, and we'll see what it looks like after. Old ball joints are out. These are the new ball joints. They're for a 2000 XJ, a Cherokee, because Auto Shack here in Canada didn't carry any for a TJ. The instructions say to use a little bit of oil when you install these. I'm going to use a little bit of anti-seize. Before I install them, I usually like to clean this up a little bit if there's any scale or anything. So I took a file to the top surface here, a little bit of sandpaper in here. Same thing for the bottom. Let's get them in there. Okay, we're all set up to install the lower ball joint. As I said, I put some anti-seize on the new one here. Very important to keep everything straight. So if I back up and focus, we can see that the assembly is straight with where the upper ball joint goes. You need that to go in straight. If it goes in on an angle, it's not going to be a good day. Straight that way. Move over to the front. Just take a step back, make sure it's straight that way as well. Now the adapter set is what makes that possible, because it comes with this smaller cup which fits the angle of the existing just there, which most kits don't come with. If you rent a tool, like here in Canada we can rent tools from Canadian Tire, and they don't come with that. That's why I went and bought the specific adapter set for this vehicle, and as I said, it works on Dodges as well. Upper ball joint installation. Lower ball joints in. One thing I forgot to do was check where this grease nipple is going to end up before I pushed it in there. So what you should do is actually tighten, make sure that's tight into that. Set it where you want it to be. I can still grease this if the wheel is turned all the way to the right, so I got lucky, but make sure you know where that's going to end up before you push this in here, because you want that actually to face that way towards the front of the car, so you can grease it with the wheels straight or whatever. It doesn't matter. I got lucky. I can still get this, but up here, same thing, just in reverse. We're going to push the ball joint, press it down into the upper, and we're using the same adapter cups as before for the installation of the bottom one. So this is the smaller, this is this one, and this one. Again, this is the one with the angle on it, and that angle, as you can see, if we look from the front view, meets this angle right here. So it's thicker here, thinner back there. And again, just like when we installed the bottom one, we're going to take a step back, make sure everything looks straight up and down. From the front, we're going to take a step back from the side, make sure everything looks straight up and down, and then we tighten it in. New upper and lower ball joints are in. We're going to put it all back together now. We'll start with this piece. We'll use the new castle nuts and cotter pins that came with the new ball joints. If you're looking for torque specs, you can find them online. When you tighten this on, you need to line up the slot with the hole to put in the new cotter pin. That's the same for the lower and the upper, as well as the tie rod. You may, at the end of this, need to get an alignment because you've changed, you put in new parts, and sometimes that needs to happen. When you drive it, you'll figure it out. After you put that on, you're going to put back in the unit bearing. If you need to do your U-joint, now's a good time. Make sure you torque these 3 bolts to spec like all the other bolts. Put some grease or anti-seize on this surface. As you put this drive shaft back into the hole, axle shaft, excuse me, you don't want to run the end of the shaft along the bottom. You need to support it behind the unit bearing and in front of the unit bearing so that it doesn't do that, because you don't want this sand, this crud that's bound to be in there, ending up in there. You don't want anything on the end of this ending up in there, any dirt or crud. After you do that, you'll put on your rotor, your caliper, your wheel, torque everything to spec. No more play, good to go. Job done, upper and lower ball joints complete. The only issue I had putting it back together was the lower ball joint grease nipple. We're striking the U-joint in the axle shaft, so I took it out and put in the plug that comes with the kit. If I have to grease it later on, I'll take it all apart, put the nipple back in, grease it, put it all back together, and take the grease nipple out, put the plug back in. Grease the tie rod. General overview of the tools I used, again, generic ball joint kit, Jeep Dodge adapter kit, both available on Amazon. You can get a master kit that has everything you need without buying separate things, but this was a lot cheaper. Mini sledge, pry bar, needle nose, generic sockets. We used the 22 a fair bit. The 28, which you might have to buy separate, was for the old lower. The new lower nut was a 34. A torque wrench, of course, because we want accurate torque. I don't know if you can rent a torque wrench or not, but they're not that expensive to begin with. Wire brush, file for cleaning stuff up. Grease gun, make sure everything's all greased up. Impact gun's optional. I used it just because I have one. Anti-seize for putting stuff together. WD-40 for taking it apart. And a light. The passenger side is the exact same as the driver's side. That's about it. Thanks for hanging out in Cooper's Corner.